friends, it's Jessica from Three Rivers Homestead, and we're back with another video where I'm going to show you what we are doing here on the homestead, all of the wonderful food that we are harvesting and either cooking in fresh meals or preserving for meals that we will eat over the winter when fresh food isn't available. We're going to be doing some peach salsa and peach pie filling, and I'm also going to show you some ways that I've been using zucchini. And the garden at this point of the year is really starting to look like a jungle. It's very exciting. We have a lot of summer crops that are starting to come on, and it was time this week to go ahead and harvest the first batch of potatoes. Now, these were potatoes that were planted in 2024, I believe in late August. I just had 10 random potatoes that were sprouted in my cellar, and so I decided to experiment with throwing them in the ground that late, and they didn't sprout at all. They didn't produce a plant above ground at all last year, but they overwintered underground. And then this spring, as soon as the soil warmed, these plants popped up out of the ground before I had a chance really to do anything with this area of the garden. This is my one in-ground area of the garden. Everything else is in raised beds. And so this year, this area was pretty out of control because I didn't do a lot of weeding in my pregnancy last year. And so I really was excited to get these potatoes out of the ground because now that they're out of there, I can use my little cultivator and go in and stir this soil up, get it really weeded and amended, and turn it into something that can produce a little more abundant of a crop. I'm thinking I'm going to plant bush beans in here next week. And then next year, I'm hoping to make this area a strawberry patch. All of my strawberry plants that I planted in raised beds over the last few years died last winter. It just got too cold in the raised beds. And so I've realized if I want to have fresh strawberries for my family, they're going to need to be in ground. And so this is the first step in clearing and reclaiming this place to become a future strawberry bed. But I did harvest half of the potatoes that were out here. It was way too hot and I had to stop after half. So we will enjoy eating these fresh over the next month. We're also beginning to enjoy things like banana peppers. These are the first peppers to come on, and I had a little harvest of them this week, so I decided to add them to some peaches that I had bought at the farm store. We have peaches, banana peppers, just a few of the onions that I grabbed that were ready. I haven't harvested all of my onions yet. I'm hoping to do that next week. And then I decided we're going to go ahead and make some peach salsa. This is one of my favorite things to make with peaches. We do a little bit every year, and I'm going to show you how I make that. I'm going to go ahead and link the recipe and all of the canning instructions in the video description. I use a USDA approved canning recipe, but in place of red sweet peppers in this recipe, I am using banana peppers on this day. And another thing that I do to deviate from the recipe is I do not peel my peaches. Now that is not necessarily recommended for safe canning processes. But if you're comfortable with a little bit of rebel canning, you can leave the peels on and it makes a delicious addition to your salsa. If you want to follow the rules a little more, go ahead and peel those peaches first before you make this salsa. But this is just one of my favorite things to do with peaches. It makes a delicious salsa for dipping your chips in, but it also is a wonderful marinade. My favorite thing to do is to put it on pork roasts, and I'll show you later how I did that this week. But we added some garlic. I had harvested that in a video a couple weeks ago and shown you guys that process. All the garlic is down curing in the cellar right now, but we went ahead and grabbed maybe 4 or 5 bulbs of that to get it peeled to add to our salsa that we're making here. We also grabbed a few of the onions. Like I said, most of them are going to be harvested next week, but we just grabbed some where the bulbs were big enough to add to our salsa. And it really is an easy recipe. So besides the peaches, garlic, onion, and pepper, you do add a tiny bit of sugar. You could do honey or a different sweetener if you don't like to do sugar in your family. And you also add a little bit of crushed red pepper, and then you can use apple cider vinegar or distilled white vinegar. We're using distilled white vinegar because that's the only store-bought vinegar that I have in the house right now. And for canning purposes, you really do want to use store-bought vinegar. I do make a lot of homemade vinegar, and I would love to use it in my canning, but you really do need to have your vinegar at a tested and true acidity level just to make sure that it's going to be water bath canned safely, because that has to do with the acidity level in your product. So make sure you use store-bought or test your homemade vinegar for a pH level. So my little helpers here got everything all put into our pot. Now, this is another thing that I do to save time and just be a little more efficient, because when you're canning with lots of small children, you have to get things done as quickly as possible. I can't take my time and chop everything by hand. So I just put everything in the pot and use my immersion blender to kind of chop it down. And that works perfectly for us because, like I said, I'm mostly using this as a marinade to pour over my pork roast. And so having it this texture works perfectly. Once we got all of the ingredients put together, I bring it in and bring it to a boil on the stove just to kind of cook it down a little bit and get rid of some of the excess liquid, because those peaches are rather juicy. And then we are going to can this in pint jars, because I find that 1 pint of this salsa is the perfect amount to add to my crock pot with 1 or 2 pork roasts in there. So we're just going to fill those, and then we're going to get ready to process them. So the amount of time it's going to take to process these jars is dependent on the altitude at which you live. So check out the recipe that's linked in the video description. It'll tell you exactly how much. We only needed to process these for 15 minutes where we live. And as always, we want to make sure that we wipe the rims of our jars. You don't want to have anything sticky stuck on that rim, or else you might not get a good seal with your canning lid. That can prevent that. And while you're wiping, it also gives you a chance to check for any cracks that might be in the glass that could also affect your seal. And then we're going to put on some of our 4 jars canning lids. You guys know these are my favorite canning lids. And if you would like 10% off your next order of lids in preparation for canning season, check out the link in the video description and use my code 3rivers10, and that can get you 10% off. Now we are going to water bath can these. That means that we can just stick them in a pot of boiling water, and once it comes to a rolling boil, we'll set our timer for 15 minutes, and these will be safely canned. The reason why we can water bath can these despite all of the vegetables that are in there is because we added that vinegar to the recipe. Things like salsa have vinegar in them, and that makes it acidic enough to be safely water bath canned. If we didn't add that vinegar, these would need to go into the pressure canner, because with all of that veggie in there, it would not be acidic enough to be safely water bath canned. So I've got my helpers. They are learning how to can. We've got a new generation of canners here. My older children are so busy with their teenage lives that now I'm teaching and training the next generation of Three Rivers Homestead children to help me with my canning projects, and they love to be a help. It's such a blessing to have all these little hands to help chop and fill jars, and I love getting to spend that time with them, because as a busy mother, canning would not happen if I couldn't include my children, because they are home with me all day and we need to do these things together. We had enough to get 8 pint jars, and I had a little bit left over. It was about 3/4 of a jar, not enough to can. So I went ahead and poured that over a couple pork roasts on a really busy day, and that just makes the most delicious meat. You have to try it. So with some more of these peaches that we had this week, I decided to do a batch of peach pie filling. I'm going to show you my process for that. So what I like to do is go ahead and slice my peaches. For this, I also can with the peach skins off. If you don't feel comfortable doing that, make sure to remove your skins. That is the recommended practice, but I have been canning for many, many years, 18, 19 years, and we don't mind having the texture of the peaches skins in our peach pie filling. It works just great. So I start by slicing all of my peaches and putting them in the jar. We want to fill 7 quart jars with peach slices. Then I'm going to work on making my pie filling goo. I'm going to do 4.5 cups of sugar, 1.5 cups of arrowroot powder, a teaspoon of salt, 2 teaspoons of cinnamon, 9.5 cups of water, and then I did approximately 3 tablespoons of lemon juice. And you're going to want to get that on the stove until it thickens up. I don't necessarily boil it, just put it on heat until it begins to thicken. Then I can dump those jars of peach slices that I sliced up and put them back into the goo. It's just easier sometimes with some fruits to pour it back in and mix it together, because otherwise if I just poured the goo over the fruit, sometimes I get a lot of air trapped in the jars, and it's really hard to debubble it and get those air pockets out, and it ends up affecting the headspace in my jar and how much filling is in there. Now you might be thinking, why didn't I just chop the stuff separately in a separate bowl? Why did I put it in the jar? I just think filling the jars with your fruit helps give you a really accurate amount of fruit versus guessing the number of peaches it's going to take to fill all of the jars with slices. So we really pushed the limits of how much we could fit in that pot, and thankfully it all fit, and we got it stirred around. And now we're going to fill the jars. We did take a little chopstick and debubble it, because regardless of whether we mix the fruit inside the jar or outside, there are going to be a few air pockets in there. So we just take that chopstick and stir it around in there, and that helps release the extra air. And then once again, wanting to get that pie goo is super sticky. So if that gets up there on the rim, you might not get a good seal. And then we're going to get our lids on these jars. So one batch in my canner, my water bath canner, I can fit 7-quart jars or 9-pint jars. So when I am cutting up my fruit and making this recipe, it is good for 1 load in the water bath canner. And since this is a fruit and it has the lemon juice, it is acidic enough, once again, to be water bath canned. So just like with the peach salsa, we're going to get this filled with water, covering the jars. We're going to bring it to a rolling boil, and then once it begins to boil, we'll set our timer for 25 minutes. And when we're done, we will have 7 delicious sealed quart jars of peach pie filling. These are going to be loved in my home come this winter. We want a little taste of summer. It's going to taste like fresh peaches when I make a delicious peach pie for Thanksgiving or someone's birthday over the winter. So, speaking of buying canning lids and getting all prepared for canning season, I walked down in my cellar this week and just realized that it was a mess. And I also need to make room for more storage down here. So, I moved some stuff around and rearranged some shelves to consolidate things, and was able to put another shelving unit down here with a bunch of new canning jars that I was gifted by a friend who is done canning and had saved all of her jars to give to me. So I wasn't able to do a complete full pantry organization. I did the best I could in the limited time I had this week, but I was able to fit another canning shelf down here. Here are all my jars that I'm going to work to fill this summer, and slowly but surely my canning space is coming together, and I'm preparing to fill every shelf down here with canned stuff over this preserving season. The hallway back here is a mess. There's a lot of empty jars too. There's a lot of work to fill all of these jars. But the next step in filling them, it is blackberry season. I'm so excited. I got my first little quart of blackberries harvested this year. Our blackberry bushes are loving the weather. And so next week, as we get more blackberries, I'm going to work on some jam, and I will show that in next week's video. But besides that, the main crop in the garden right now is cucumbers, and we are just making batches of fermented pickles. I showed you that process in last week's video. The kids are loving that, and I'm slowly filling the refrigerator with fermented pickles. Other than that, zucchini is what's in season right now, and if you've ever grown zucchini, you know that one plant can put out quite a bit. And my kids get very sick of just eating fried zucchini as a side dish or grilled zucchini as their vegetable. They like for me to bake with zucchini. So the first thing that I like to make with it is zucchini pie. So I start by making up a pie crust, and just whatever regular pie crust you like to use will work for this. I was using fresh ground flour for a more rustic pie crust. Then I'm going to get all of my zucchini shredded. I'm going to give you the recipe for zucchini pie if you're just doing a single pie. I tend to double it and put it in a big cast iron pan for my family. So for a single pie, you would do 1 cup of shredded zucchini, just like I'm shredding it here. We're going to do a 1/2 cup of sugar, 2 tablespoons of flour, a 1/2 teaspoon of salt, 1 teaspoon of vanilla, 1 egg, and I do about 1 1/2 cups of almond milk. We are a dairy-free family. If you can have dairy, you could do something like a can of regular whole milk or cream or something like that. That would be nice and thick. That would give it some good texture. But what I like to do just to simplify the process is put all of those ingredients into a jar. And you guys know I love my immersion blender. It makes things so much easier. So I just whip all of that together. It gets the egg all whipped up and kind of helps to blend that zucchini more into the filling here. And then I'm just pressing my pie crust down into my cast iron pan. I have my oven preheated to 425 degrees. I bake it for about 10 minutes at 425 degrees, and then I switch it to 350 degrees until the center is done. I did sprinkle a little bit of cinnamon on the top before we baked it, and this is one of Adam's favorite things that I make with zucchini. It's just something a little different than zucchini bread, which is what I typically make. And so sometimes I'll make the zucchini pie just to have a break from the zucchini bread, but I really do love filling the kitchen with a bunch of batches of little zucchini breads because my teenagers will just grab these and have them as a snack whenever. So I'm going to post my zucchini bread recipe in the video description for you. I've made this many times for you guys before, but on this day I doubled it and I'm putting it in these little containers like I said, and I baked them for my boys who both have jobs this summer, and when they get home they're sometimes hungry. So they can just grab one of these and it'll fill them up while they're waiting for the next meal. So we're in the swing of canning. I'm also finishing up the month of July with homeschool. We homeschool through the month of July, but I will be taking the month of August off of school with my children because we are going to be preserving and canning so much every day during the Every Bit Counts challenge that I really can't do both things at once. I can't do it all. And so well, the homeschooling will take a back seat for August, and then we'll pick it back up in September. And so I'm going to be back next week with more preservation projects with what we have growing on the homestead. Make sure you're following if you love canning and preservation, because that is what my content will be through the rest of the summer. And also make sure you're following the hashtag EveryBitCounts Challenge so that you can follow everybody else who's also participating in the preservation challenge this August. So next week we're going to be doing blueberries and blackberries and probably whatever other vegetables are in abundance, probably some green beans and things. Until then, I hope you guys have a lovely week and that your gardens are all thriving. We will see you back next week with more friends. Bye.